So, the citizen engagement is very important in every governance system. And insofar as, that is being promoted in our society.
Ghana and the US have always had strong ties. The country is seen as somewhat of a pilgrimage for African Americans because it was a major slave trade point. It was the first country in Africa to obtain independence from colonial rule in 1957, and its founding father, Kwame Nkrumah, was the role model for African Americans during the civil rights movement.
We're on the move now.
This day will never be forgotten, the 6th of March 1957, when the Gold Coast successfully get your independence officially. Ghana, Ghana is the name. Ghana, we wish to proclaim, we will be jolly, merry and gay, the 6th of March, Independence Day. Dr. Nkrumah went out his way to make the Gold Coast what it is today. He endeavored continually to bring us freedom and liberty. Ghana, Ghana is the name. Ghana, we wish to proclaim, we will be jolly, merry and gay, the 6th of March, Independence Day. The doctor began as agitator, then he became popular leader. He continued to go further, and now he is Ghana's Prime Minister. Ghana, Ghana is the name. Ghana, we wish to proclaim, we will be jolly, merry and gay, the 6th of March, Independence Day. The national flag is a lovely scene with beautiful colors, red, gold and green, and a black star in the center representing the freedom of Africa. Ghana, Ghana is the name. Ghana, we wish to proclaim, we will be jolly, merry and gay, the 6th of March, Independence Day. Congratulations from Haile Selassie was proudly received by everybody. He particularly commented on the doctor's move to self-government. Ghana, Ghana is the name. Ghana, we wish to proclaim, we will be jolly, merry and gay, the 6th of March, Independence Day.
The powerful laughed at him, flung names at him, veranda boy, subversive, agitator. But the people want for all the black peoples of Africa.
Early next morning, Her Royal Highness drives in state to the Parliament of Ghana, there to make known the Queen's gracious message. It is 69 years since the first African unofficial member was nominated to the old Legislative Council of the Gold Coast Colony. It is 6 years since the first properly democratic elections were permitted. Yesterday this Parliament was subject to the Parliament of Britain. Today its members owe loyalty only to the people of Ghana. Thus ends, with dignity and honor, 100 years of colonial occupation and colonial rule. With sitting ceremony, the Duchess of Kent reads to the representatives of Ghana in Parliament assembled the Queen's message of freedom. She tells them of the Queen's pride that today a new member of the Commonwealth is born. She gives them the Queen's congratulations and the Queen's best wishes.
I have it in command from the Queen to read to you the following message from Her Majesty to her people in Ghana. I have entrusted to her heart the duty of opening on my behalf, the first session of the Parliament of Ghana. My thoughts are with you on this great day as you take up the full responsibilities of independent nationhood. It is my earnest and confident belief that my people in Ghana will go forward in freedom and justice, in unity among themselves, and in brotherhood with all the peoples of the Commonwealth. God bless you all. Elizabeth R.
The Prime Minister goes to the throne and receives the Queen's message. From now onward, these will be the proceedings of a sovereign parliament. Waiting outside to see her, many thousands of people cheer Her Royal Highness. Now the great change is made, peacefully, in good friendship, in a manner befitting the will of the people of Ghana and the will of the people of Britain. Triumph for his cause, and those who believed in that cause, who followed him. Yes, it looks easy now, but it was not easy. He tramped the streets for work. He took what jobs he could get. He scrubbed floors. He wiped dishes. Moved hunks of carcass in a silk factory.
Just under the stars, under the cold stars of foreign cities, he knew hunger. He never gave up, and many befriended him. He wanted freedom.
The cynical and the powerful laughed at him, flung names at him, veranda boy, subversive, agitator. But the people wanted freedom. They followed him. To the people he said the simple things: decency, hard work, self-respect, self-government. Self-government now. Of the imperial government he asked the simple things: not gifts, not charity, but rights. The rights of man. The government put him in prison. They tried to forget him. They failed. Herbert Macaulay, Casey Hayford, Hutton Mills, Agre, Minster Saba, the great names of West African rebirth are joined by another, Kwame Nkrumah. And what next? The story of free Africa is only now beginning. Kwame Nkrumah tells the people they're a free nation. Another nation in the world added to so many. Does that help? Remember this. Until the peoples are nations, they will not be recognized. And until the nations are free, they will not have peace. That is why the people shout for freedom.
My friend, I'm telling you, I won't forget it. It wasn't because of that one man. It was just all of us happy.
And we dedicate ourselves not only in the struggle to emancipate other territories in Africa. Our independence is meaningless unless it links up the total repression of the African continent.
We are going to demonstrate to the world, to the other nations, young as we are, that we are practicing our own foundation. We are going to see that we create our own African personality and identity. We dedicate ourselves not only in the struggle to emancipate other territories in Africa. Our independence is meaningless unless it links up the total repression of the African continent.
Abo Wanyoko Mare Makasa Kakra Enzi Wanyoko Mene Wentiam Kakra Menkasa Pi Dame Pere Makande Mbakans Bafo Kakra Na Miwe Makan Panse. At long last the battle has ended. And thus, Ghana, your beloved country, is free forever. And here again, I want to take the opportunity to thank the chiefs and people of this country, the youth, the farmers, the women, who have so nobly fought and won this battle. Also, I want to thank the valiant ex-servicemen who have so cooperated with me in this mighty task of freeing our country from foreign rule and imperialism. And as I pointed out at our party conference at Sorbonne, I made it quite clear that from now on today, we must change our attitudes, our minds. We must realize that from now on, we are no more a colonial, but a free and independent people. But also, as I pointed out, that also entails hard work. I am depending upon the millions of the country, the chiefs and people, to help me to reshape the destiny of this country. We are prepared to build it up and make it a nation that will be respected by every other nation in the world. We know we are going to have difficult beginnings, but again, I'm relying upon your support. I'm relying upon your hard work. Seeing you in these thousands, it doesn't matter how far my eye goes. I can see that you are here in your millions. And my last warning to you is that you ought to stand firm behind us so that we can prove to the world that when the African is given a chance, he can show to the world that he's somebody. We are waiting. We shall no more go back to sleep anymore. Today, from now on, there is a new African in the world. That new African is ready to fight his own battle and show that after all, the black man is capable of managing his own affairs. We are going to demonstrate to the world, to the other nations, young as we are, that we are prepared to lay our own foundation. As I said in the assembly just minutes ago, I made a point that we are going to see that we create our own African personality and identity. It's the only way in which we can show the world that we are ready for our own battle. But today, may I call upon you all that at this great day, let us all remember that nothing in the world can be done unless it has the purported support of God. We have done the battle. And we again rededicate ourselves not only in the struggle to emancipate other territories in Africa. Our independence is meaningless unless it is linked up with the total liberation of the African continent. Let us now, fellow Ghanaians, let us now ask for God's blessing. And for only 2 seconds, in your thousands and millions, I want to ask you to pause only for 1 minute and give thanks to Almighty God for having led us through obstacles, difficulties, imprisonments, hardship and suffering. to have brought us to the end of our trouble today. 1 minute silence. Ghana is free forever. And here I will ask the band to play the Ghana national anthem. Freedom! Freedom!
Will never be forgotten. The 6th of March 1957, when the Gold Coast successfully...
The Gold Coast, to be called Ghana from March 1957, was a post-colonial enigma in sub-Saharan Africa. Its charismatic leader, Kwame Nkrumah, largely created this aura. Highly critical of colonial governance, this well-known Pan-Africanist presented through his personality and activities a political trinity, prophetic to some, controversial to others, and dictatorial in the eyes of some analysts of the African situation. Ghana and Africa, he believed, were one.
He endeavored continually to bring us freedom and liberty.
He could have been right in a sense, but he had debatable ideas which defined how the contours of the economy of this newly independent country would be shaped and the nation fared. "50 years on, have the dreams of the forefathers been realised? There are still challenges created out of earlier political instability, weak political structures and economic institutions, sometimes heading towards collapse, but still beams of hopes and progress."
What was the purpose of the economic recovery program under the PNDC?
Iva Ajimandua, an author and in his three-part television series an economic historian, takes us through a huge journey of challenges, atonement and progress. In Structures and Institutions in a Post-Colonial Economy, he takes us through how the colonial economy changed to post-colonial under Kwame Nkrumah and the consequences of this. Part 2, A Vampire Economy with a Silver Lining, looks at the role of public policy, and in the third part, Crossing the Jordan, stimulation and innovation in the economy, which accesses the growth of Ghana's financial and private sectors. The good news for Ghana's 21st century economy has been its discovery of oil, and how an emergent oil economy could address its challenges and promise. The arguments or commentaries of 20 distinguished economists, bureaucrats, politicians and scholars are used in all.
Particularly comment on the doctor's move to self-government. Ghana is the name. Ghana will reach the problem. We will be jolly, merry and gay. And 6th of March, Independence
Every economy hedges on structures and institutions, civil service, diplomatic missions, the secretariat of presidency, and the extent to which these institutions enhance national progress. The post-colonial economy of Ghana from 1957 had to do likewise, how to build from the departing British colonial type which served a different purpose. Anin Achinketo joined Ghana's civil service 44 years ago and saw how it fared under an African authority.
I think that it is a painful truth that one must accept, that the whole rationale of colonialism was that the African was incapable of governing himself, and therefore that you needed an authority to direct the life of the African. And so the colonial administration was one that was staffed, certainly at the top level, exclusively by British citizens. And their duty and focus, essentially, was to ensure stability and total respect of the administration under which we came, and also to make sure that they administer the colonies for the benefit of the colonial power. That was what it was.
Indeed, it would have been strange if after Kwame Nkrumah's agitation for independence, the same structures had been maintained.
Of course, politicians come and politicians go. But the public service tends to be abiding. They have an important repository role. They really have to be custodians of the institutional memory.
But the structures and personnel which the departing colonial services had left behind were neither willing to go along with the new realities, nor were they prepared to work under Nkrumah's Africanization of the civil service.
The information that we have, the records do indicate that from the time of Ghana becoming, achieving internal self-government up to 1957, and even in the period immediately following Ghana's independence, the colonial civil service was reluctant to operate under an African government, and therefore that their loyalty was suspect. And the evidence would show that not only were they reluctant to do this, but also during the period of internal self-government at the beginning and so forth, many records were hidden away from the government that Nkrumah led. And so here you are in 1953, you have a group of people forming the Legislative Council of the country and Nkrumah internal self-government. To begin with, records of what was going on in the various ministries were unavailable to them.
The new government would go ahead to formulate economic policies with the newly promoting Ghanaians from the old colonial structures. But what really was the central economic policy of the Nkrumah government? F.A. Jantua, who served as agricultural minister, is not only a big-time socialist, but revealer of Nkrumah's most philosophical work, Conscientism, a sort of political economy of how to work a socialist system, but a defender of the good in such policies.
Nkrumah was a socialist, basically. He wanted to build an economy based upon socialism. An economy based upon socialism is common ownership, the means of production, distribution, and exchange. And is that when you talk of public ownership, the economy belongs to the society as a whole. The economy depends on planning.
The policies certainly yielded dividends. Employment came with the expansion of the state enterprises, which by 1966 were 53, with 12 public boards. There was an increase in the number of public paid employees from about 98,000 to 250,000. We also saw an investment in the economy from about 19 to 25%. Not only that, but there was also a massive infrastructure development programme. The construction of the Akosombo Dam, the Tema Harbour and the entire Tema Township, including the motorway.
And during this period, we had a rapid growth in certain key social areas: primary schools, middle schools, teacher training colleges, universities. Unbelievable growth. These were all areas that had experienced some growth, but very limited growth, very timid growth because of obvious colonial policies. But he said, no, we're going to change this. You look at the orientation of these plans, they're actually almost identical to what South Korea, right around the same time, also adopted, which was one to produce consumer goods using imported machinery. And so what they did was to do surveys and find out what Ghanaians used most. So they found, for instance, that we use a lot of matches because we have to light charcoal and so forth and so on. And we were buying a lot of matches and importing them. So then he went ahead and set up the Kede match factory. And then they realized, well, we also need sugar for our cocoa and the rest of it. So the Commander Sugar Factory and other things. We have to wear shoes in the Kumasi Shoe Factory. So it was this rapid integrated approach to development, calling for massive investments, which he made. People are often heard saying that, well, he squandered some huge amounts of monies that he inherited from the British, which is all false. What really happened was that at the time of independence in 1957, Nkrumah said, wait a minute, you guys owe us 200 million pounds. This was money that the British forcibly took from us during Second World War. They took from actually cocoa proceeds. As we exported the cocoa, they took the money along with some minimal interest that they set, which is actually quite a good deal. You borrow the money on your own terms, which was what they did. And they used that to support the pound at the end of the Second World War, when the pound had more or less collapsed. So Nkrumah said, give us our money. And they did. They were kind enough to give us our 200 million pounds. Then the question is, what did he use the money for? You look at the Kosomo Dam, which was then 70 million pounds. We paid half of that. He was willing to pay all of it. But for obvious strategic reasons, the Americans, the World Bank, and the British insisted on paying the remaining half. The Tema Harbor and the entire Tema Township was raised partly from that money. The motorway, which originally was supposed to run from Tema to Kumasi, Buankra, the Buankra inland port, and then to Paga in the north. All these things came from there. So if anything, the money wasn't even adequate to begin with, given the scale of projects and the ambition and the vision that he had for Ghana. And then come 1965, we had the collapse in cocoa prices, which then subverted the plan. It brought all the hardships, which rather unfortunately served as a basis for the military coup in 1966. And we haven't recovered from it yet.
The major public policies during this period were embodied in the 5-year development plan, for which Nkrumah had, with the agreement of the UNDP, invited the St. Lucian economist and future Nobel laureate in economics W. Arthur Lewis to manage. This was between 1957 to 1958. His plan was a mixed economy in outlook, and Lewis had wanted to use state intervention and planning to supplement the private sector, foreign investment and the promotion of economic institutions bounded with the United Kingdom and the United States. But soon Nkrumah had sharp disagreements with Lewis, and by 1961 the state had taken a central role in the economy. Lewis left, and the second major plan was the 7-year development plan, by which time the National Planning Commission had been established by Nkrumah. In 1962, H. Miller Craig, J. H. Mensah and T. T. Nair, all Western-trained economists, had taken over the preparation of the plan. J. H. Mensah, who had graduated from the London School of Economics, like Arthur Lewis before him, finally emerged as the influential figure of the plan, but the ideological war was not over. Nkrumah had insisted that Joseph Bagua, a 44-year-old former Karl Marx professor of trade at Budapest University, be included in the team. Nkrumah did not believe that the plan would have ideological dimensions, having criticised J. H. Mensah of lacking ideological purity. Gareth Austin, a reader in economic history at the London School of Economics, was asked whether there were smart public policies to combat the post-colonial economy, especially the two development plans.
Smart, of course, depends on what your objectives were, and governments always have political as well as economic objectives. And they also operate, as we all do, in the context of our time. The CPP government was given advice from some of the most prominent economists of the day, and I suppose you could say they were selective in the extent to which they responded to it. But W.A. Lewis, the West Indian economist who won the Nobel Prize, wrote a famous report on industrialization on the Gold Coast in 1953, where he advised the Ghana government that it was too early to adopt a policy of import substitution industrialization, even though he himself had a famous model on how you could industrialize using cheap labor. He thought Ghana's labor is not cheap because the population is relatively light in terms of the available land. So he could not see a way of going for industrialization early. In a sense, the government followed that policy for a few years, and then in 1961 adopts a more radical policy, with much more government intervention and tries to achieve import substitution industrialization. I suppose Lewis might say that they were too impatient. I think in retrospect, probably Lewis was right, and that policy would have, to have been a bit more patient, would have been the more effective policy. But at the time, that policy change that Kwame Nkrumah made was in line with what many other leading economists of the time were saying, which was the government has to lead in economic development. So at the time it would have seemed smart to many people.
By 1963, both the 5- and 7-year development plans notwithstanding, the little structural changes recorded were not enough to propel anticipated growth. Agriculture accounted for 40% of GDP, manufacturing was 10%, and especially from 1960 to 1966, the Economic Survey of Ghana 1966 indicated that there was no increase in GNP per capita. In addition, the population had increased by 17%. Although the reasons for this vary, the collapse in the price of cocoa by between 24 to 30% was a major factor. Cocoa is a commodity, which had been the live wire of the economy. Indeed, between 1954 to 1957, it led to almost a civil war, instigated by the big cocoa-growing Ashanti region. The Nkrumah government had decided that though there was increase in the world price of the commodity, the producer price would remain the same. Arguably, in doing this, Nkrumah was only adopting the British colonial strategy, which had created the Cocoa Marketing Board during the Second World War to hold up prices within the Gold Coast, when they thought that the world price would fall. The British also discovered that it was a very good way of taxing the farmers when the world price was high. Nkrumah had intended that the windfall would be used to grow other sectors of the economy.
Now, at this point, he was also more or less at loggerheads with Americans, which I thought, looking back now, was somewhat tactless on his part. Because you don't, when you face adversaries like that, you use your wits as opposed to trying to flex your muscles, because they can easily swap you. So he was going through this period where he has these disagreements with Americans. So even when Ghana qualified in this period for some sort of assistance from the IMF and the World Bank, the Americans were pulling the strings in the background. If you read the declassified CIA documents, where they were saying, no, let's hold back. Let's not give him these funds to tide him over. Let's hold back the funds and create desperate conditions in Ghana that will lead to desperate actions on his part, and therefore create the pretext for a military coup. And the frightening thing is that that's precisely what is also being done in Zimbabwe today.
But to Dr. Dirk Jan Ontezit of Oxford University, his research work has centred on that period and also served as international lead economist for Adam Smith International in Africa. It was not the case.
Now, the problem was that Nkrumah really used a lot of anti-colonial, anti-capitalist rhetoric. So there's no aid forthcoming from the Western countries. Similarly, the kind of emphasis on the state as a main actor really put off lots of private sector investment. So aid in private sector direct foreign investment was about 10% of the requirement. So the third one was borrowing. But the problem is most of the capital was tied up in with Western countries, not countries which might be friendly to the Nkrumah regime. So they had to resort to putting import restrictions on various goods, just so import quotas happened. And secondly, there was a lot of printing of money. So what was the result? Now we saw that, first of all, by putting import restrictions, even the most basic ingredients for production weren't available. So the gold mining company didn't have enough fuel and explosives to actually mine the gold. The bamboo manufacturer just spent about 80 times as much on wages than on imported inputs. So clearly, what you saw was like very, very low utilization rates of these companies. For example, the nationalized footwear company had only had a utilization rate of about 24%. So really, productivity was very, very low. At the same time, the government was printing money. So what did you get? You got high inflation. Last 3 years of Nkrumah, we had a double-digit inflation. We saw that this vicious circle of there's not enough foreign capital, so we have import quotas. So we can't. These companies couldn't buy the inputs for to actually produce what they want to produce. So there wasn't enough exports. So it's a vicious circle going down, and as a result, so high inflation, negative GDP per capita growth, and part of it was financed by borrowing, and the debt service ratio actually exceeded 50% when Nkrumah left power. So on all accounts, it really left the state kind of almost on the verge of bankruptcy.
The economy at this time was not growing, and political dissent within the country was growing with it. Also growing at this time was Nkrumah's fame and leadership of the Pan-African movement in Africa and the Caribbean, a global stature which had become an issue of concern to the Western protagonists of the Cold War.
What happened is that Nkrumah derived his power because he was credited with the independence of Ghana. That was his first level of support. Secondly, he raised expectations that Ghana would be the shining example of Africa within 10 years. Now, that was not going to happen. So the vicious circle of economic decline clearly was made that people lost faith, and he lost popular support. But one of the things of the vicious circle downward spiral was that there's more and more price controls. Therefore, more and more quotas could be allocated to supporters. So it actually gave the ingredients of setting up a patronage network. But at a certain point, even that didn't work.
Some called it the end of illusion, to others it was the imperialist curtailment of the Great March Forward. There is space and evidence for all of this, but few could bet that a small man with big ideological fame would be able to carry the Western Africa post-independent state as a fodder in an ideologically charged Cold War of the 1960s. Vietnam in Central Asia was the unintended transit, and Conakry became home away from home. But the shadows of the past lingered on, and the future economic development would grow out of the unsettled past.
Dominant theme of the Congress has been down with imperialism and colonialism. But within the committees themselves, there has been bitter dissension. Final resolutions are moderate enough, though. About the only positive thing that emerges from them is the establishment of a permanent secretariat here in Accra. Although Tom Mboya did, in his closing speech, ask for the imposition of economic sanctions against the Union of South Africa.
See me holding the cine camera and being protected.
Reverend Chris Hesse is taking a trip down memory lane at his office in the Ghanaian capital, Accra.
This picture was taken around 1960 when I accompanied the first president to a tour of the Soviet Union. It wasn't only the Soviet Union, we went to the eastern countries, about 30 eastern countries. You can see them. You can see me here. I was then a young boy of about 25, 26. That is the president. And the other officials.
Hesse is an award-winning cameraman and television producer whose personal history is closely linked to Ghana's.
At that time, the colonial government had set up a film school, a West African film school in Ghana, so I joined. That was the Gold Coast Film Unit. And that was where I started learning filmmaking. And I went to the camera department. And when we had independence in 1957, from 1956, when we had our internal independence with Kwame Nkrumah as the Prime Minister, I became his personal cameraman throughout.
Chris Hesse was there behind the lens when the charismatic Pan-Africanist Kwame Nkrumah took the reins of Black Africa's first independent nation in 1957. Ghana's triumph sparked a wave of independence movements across a continent yearning to rid itself of centuries of slavery and colonialism.
I am convinced that it is dangerous for the independent African state to wait any longer for the United Kingdom to do its duty. The time has come for the independent African states to take the initiative in their own hands.
But Nkrumah's dictatorial tendencies and poor economic leadership soon turned the people's idealism into bitterness.
I think Nkrumah thought that by 1970, if you check the principles of his 7-year development plan, which was to run 1964 through to 1971, where he thought would be in the middle income bracket already by then Nkrumah would regret that he was unable to achieve it and before he was overthrown, and we have still not been able to achieve it by now.
His socialist leanings at the height of the Cold War meant he was treated with suspicion by some in the West.
The forces arrayed against us are, and I use the word most carefully, formidable. They are entrenched and powerful. They are, as I have taken some pains to explain, they operate in worldwide combinations at all levels: political, economic, military, cultural, educational, social, and trade. And not all, and through intelligence, cultural, and information services. They operate from European and African centers, using agents who, I'm ashamed to say, are often unpatriotic sons of Africa, buying personal satisfactions with the betrayal of their country's safety and integrity. They seduce leaders. They seduce leaders of the African political, trade union, and people's organization, thus creating rifts and quarrels within the national front. On the border front, they are amassing their forces in a determined effort to stay the advance of African liberation and the march of unity. They are attempting many methods, some sinister, some beguiling, to wreck our efforts. They strike antipathetic postures. On one side, they perform acts calculated to strike fear. On the other, they try to hoodwink us with fictitious gifts, which superficially pander to our hopes and aspirations. They are the president's attempts to deflect our purpose, to weaken our determination.
Is that working? Hey, Aaron. Yeah? Come here. Come here. Is that working? Tina.
No. What? Where?
Is that in focus?
I don't see it. I think it's fine.
Alright, let's just roll.
Ask any Ghanaian, and they'll tell you Kwame Nkrumah was the best president they ever had. So, naturally, I wanted to make a short documentary about him. But the truth of the story ended up being a little complicated. So I didn't make a documentary. Instead, I'm giving you a story, a myth, a poem, a prayer. The story begins in Ghana, a West African country of 27 million people. It is March 6, 1957, on the old British polo grounds in Accra. The country has just gained independence from the British, and the Convention People's Party, or the CPP, is establishing the first Ghanaian government. The CPP leadership selects Kwame Nkrumah as their first prime minister. He will be remembered even today as the hero of Ghana.
Ghana, your beloved country, is free forever.
The government-owned press gives him the title of Musajifo, a word meaning redeemer. The Evening News, the CPP party newspaper founded by Nkrumah, calls him Messiah, Savior, Pillar of Fire, the new Christ, the Son of God. A statue of Kwame Nkrumah is erected in front of the Parliament building. On the base of the statue is written, "Seek ye first the political kingdom, and all other things shall be added unto you." It was a paraphrasing of the Gospel of Matthew. In 1958, only a year after independence, Nkrumah's Convention People's Party passes the Preventative Detention Act. The Preventative Detention Act gives Nkrumah the power to detain any citizen at any time, without cause, and with no rights to trial and no right to appeal. Many years later, prisoners of the Preventative Detention Act would testify before a national commission that they had been beaten, left under the glare of powerful lights for days at a time, and had their meals mixed with sand. Nkrumah would personally order the detention of over 1,000 political prisoners while he is in office. One prison official later testified that because prison records were so spotty and incomplete, many prisoners were simply forgotten about, and never received trial. The Kwame Nkrumah Institute of Economics and Political Science is founded. Nkrumah says that trainees should be made to realize the party's ideology is a religion and should be carried out faithfully and fervently.
also hear that Africa's most brilliant leader, Kwame Nkrumah, spoke at a rally. What an imposing array of black talent was on the platform that afternoon as Nkrumah spoke. Malcolm X, Adam Clayton Powell, Hope Stevens, Carlos Cooks, and many others.
Now, I want to take this opportunity to welcome again to the United States, which he knows so well, the first citizen of Ghana, President Nkrumah. Yesterday, in his speech at the United Nations, he quoted a common hero, I believe, Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson also once said, "The disease of liberty is catching." It has been the object of our guest's life to make sure that that disease of liberty spreads around the globe. He has fought for it in his own country. He fights for it in Africa. He fights for it in the world. We share the same basic aspiration for the United States as he works for his own country. We share the same basic aspiration for Africa that he wishes for, and for the world. It is therefore a great honor and a great pleasure for me as President of the United States to welcome a distinguished citizen of a friendly country and also a distinguished citizen of the world, the President of Ghana, President Nkrumah.
Mr. President, as this is our first meeting since your assumption of responsibility as the President of the United States, may I be permitted to offer you my personal and hearty congratulations and those of the government and people of Ghana. We all look forward to a period of continued cooperation and understanding between our two countries. I hope that our meeting today will strengthen our relations and contribute towards the establishment of lasting peace and stability in Africa and in the world. These are troublous times. They are also times of opportunity for action. Let us therefore emphasize and consolidate the very many things that unite us, and from that starting point, tackle the problems which confront us in our time. I am sure, Mr. President, that success will crown our efforts. I thank you and the people of the United States for the warm welcome that has been accorded to me.
Who is the enemy? Fellow freedom fighters, the enemy is imperialism. Fellow freedom fighters, the enemy is imperialism. Which uses as its weapon colonialism and neocolonialism. Now though the road, who is the enemy?
freedom fighters, the enemy is in terrorism. Which uses as its weapon colonialism and new colonialism.
Now though the road, it looks so foggy, yeah, yet we got.
Who is the enemy? Fellow freedom fighters, the enemy is in terrorism. Which uses as its weapon colonialism and new colonialism.
Now though the road, it looks so foggy, yeah, yet we got to find a way. There's no place here to lay our heads, yo. And though the road, yeah, it feels so rocky, yeah. Children of Zion, hold up your heads. Never lose your confidence, yeah. Surrounding us, political spirits and demons, yo, spitting false teachings and sermons, trying to make us lose a sense of purpose. But it's time that we rise high above conflicts that divide you from I. Kwame Nkrumah's dream must live, not die. Unity and love be our war cry. Whoa! Though the road looks so foggy, Africa is not afraid. He is with us.
Mr. Bedima, what sort of constitution is it? How does it compare with other countries?
Well, the constitution which has been laid before Parliament is not different in any way from either the constitution of Canada, or Australia, or Ceylon. There have been a few clauses put in to make provision for our particular circumstances in the Gold Coast, or in Ghana.
Now, Mr. Botsio, you're bound to have some growing pains with this new constitution. What do you think is going to be the worst problem you're going to face?
Well, the matter of development. Really, within the last few years, we've gone forward at a terrific rate because of the help which we had from the high price of cocoa. Now we have to think afresh and see how far we can really develop the country.
Mr. Mramri, where do you come from?
I come from Kenya. I'm on the Kenya delegation here.
What is the political future of Kenya?
Well, as far as we are concerned, the African people are concerned, we know very clearly what we want in Kenya. It's possibly the Europeans and the Asians don't know what they want. We want an undiluted democracy, which means every man, woman, and child, whether white, black, or brown, has equal rights. We want to see the universal franchise. That, of course, will mean to some Europeans African rule, majority rule. Well, it's got to be that way.
They need have no fear?
Well, they need have no fear because I think in a democracy, a properly set up democracy, every man has equal rights and the Constitution will safeguard those rights.
From the British Protectorate of Uganda comes Mr. Abu Mayanja, founder of the Uganda National Congress.
Mr. Abu Mayanja, you are the founder of the Uganda National Congress. Can you tell me what the aims of your party are?
Yes, certainly. Our aims are to get political independence in our hands and, of course, to use this independence to achieve certain sociological, economic, and educational objects.
But before you achieve independence, do you intend to establish relations with neighboring states?
Yes, certainly, because after all, unless we have a synchronized national movement in all the various territories, it's unlikely that we shall achieve independence at any rate at the fastest possible rate.
Have you established such contacts with other countries nearby?
Yes, we in East and Central Africa have already formed the Pan-African Freedom Movement of East and Central Africa, which we call PAFMAKER, centered at Tanganyika at present time. And we do intend to work together, and we are working together for the realization of our freedom.
And this federation will have close relations with the Federation of West Africa and of Central Africa as well?
Most definitely, I think we hope. Of course, there's still a great deal of exploratory work to be done, but I believe that if the leaders of Africa in these territories start to know each other right now and start directing their thoughts to the problems which such associations and understanding and cooperation involve at this time, it would make the problem of closer understanding and relationship so much easier when the time comes to take real positive action.
Wouldn't you agree that the African parties have taken a leaf out of the European powers' book by holding these regional conferences?
Oh yes, as you know, there are regional groupings, consultations for defense of African territories south of the Sahara. These include Belgium, Portugal, South Africa, Britain, France, with the United States playing the role of kind of uninterested aunt, and so on and so forth. Now, this synchronization of the colonial powers surely is an object lesson to us. If they are synchronizing their policies and planning an overall African policy, which we view as being directed against us, as surely it is essential that we too should coordinate our policies and get a solid, united front struggle now to get at them.
From Rhodesia, Alan, president of the Northern Rhodesian National Congress.
Your party, does it believe in regional cooperation, that is with Nyasaland and Northern Rhodesia, or does it envisage cooperation with other East African territories, Kenya, Uganda, Tanganyika?
Well, I think my party does believe in creating a regional organization consisting of the three Central African states and all the East African countries. We have, I think, tried some time ago to call up a Pan-African conference, regional Pan-African conference, and we did invite representatives from East Africa, and for that matter, East Africa, South Africa, and Congo Belgium, and Mozambique. But of course, the thing was sabotaged by government.
They refused to allow them to land in the country,
yes,
I believe.
Yes.
Your party then doesn't consider cooperating with the Union of South Africa or with the multiracialism as put forward by Sir Roy Walensky.
Well, see, multiracial term is very misleading. It is a term which is being used by various European parties like the Capricorn Society and the Constitution Party, liberals in South Africa. Now, you see, multiracial society or multiracial government does not, cannot be accepted by my organization, because what we are trying to do is to free ourselves from foreign rule, become independent in as much as another country has become. But you see, that does not necessarily mean, this is why I want to qualify that, it does not necessarily mean that we don't want other races to come to and live in our country, dump in their money and develop life. The thing is, we want to achieve self-government independence.
As Ghana has done.
As Ghana has done, yes.
But you don't mind Europeans living in your country much as they live in Ghana and carrying on business?
So long as they don't claim to be the rulers, become the predominant part in all spheres of life.
Oh, and how do you then feel about Indians and other Asian people coming and living in Rhodesia as traders?
Well, they will be accepted. I mean, they will be, they can come. But it must be, I think, be clear, be made understood to them that they are to come there and live under an African government.
Madam Aminu, we met in London recently.
Yes, we met. I was there during the Nigerian Constitutional Conference.
When your country becomes independent in 2 years' time, will it eventually join in the United States of West Africa?
Of course it will.
And do you envisage also the United States of Central Africa, including the Cameroons and Belgian Congo, let's say?
Well, yes, I should think so, in close association with the United States of West Africa.
In this United States of West Africa, don't you think there might be a certain struggle for leadership between such personalities as Dr. Nkrumah, Dr. Zik, even yourself, perhaps?
No, I don't think so. I think, the African leaders would like to give their show, and for that, they would not struggle for leadership, I think.
Malam Aminu, where did the idea for a United States of West Africa first come from?
Well, I think it came from people like Du Bois, from America, and then in close association with some Nigerians in London, so that Nigeria itself is not out of the contributors.
So the idea then is not wholly and totally Dr. Nkrumah's?
No, no, I don't think so.
Mr. Mboya, you've been elected chairman of this conference. I wonder, would you tell me what it is about?
This is the first conference of all African political and trade union leaders ever to be held in Africa. The purpose of it is to try and get all these leaders to come together and discuss African problems with a view, of course, to trying to find out means and ways of collectively trying to fight against things like imperialism and colonialism, racialism, tribalism, and of course questions of boundaries between states and that sort of thing.
So you believe in Africa for Africans?
Well, I believe in Africa for the Africans in the context that there is a place called Africa, and that the people who live in that place must want to call themselves Africans. And by that, of course, I'm referring particularly to the non-Africans, the immigrant communities who have decided to make parts of Africa their homes, in South Africa, in French Africa, and in Eastern Central Africa. We believe that if they want to live in Africa, they must identify themselves with the Africans. They cannot live in Africa and still claim to be Europeans, Americans, or any other nationalities.
For expatriates still in the Congo, things went from bad to worse.
There was a lot of killing and torturing, rape and stalking, and people having to run into plantations and being chased after, and the noises, the drumming, and the soldiers were smoking chanvre, which is like cannabis. It was all pretty out of whack and chaotic and really scary.
As the Congo descended into bloody chaos, Nkrumah's dream of a united Africa also seemed to be falling apart.
I think Nkrumah was actually very typical of what happened to many African countries. After all, he was the father of independence. He'd done a great job. He was actually a very engaging person. And once he got to power, he became very deluded. I mean, he became a megalomaniac on Pan-Africanism, which he was going to lead. He became extremely paranoid about his neighbors. He became very dictatorial.
Ikeja Airport, and the drummers and the banners were out to welcome an important visitor, Prime Minister Dr. Kwame Nkrumah from Ghana. The plane was delayed an hour by engine trouble in Accra, but when Dr. Nkrumah eventually arrived, he received a warm welcome from the Prime Minister of the Federation, Alhaji Abubakar Tafawa Balewa. The Guard of Honor, 48 strong, was found by the 1st Battalion, the Queen's Own Nigeria Regiment, who brought their mascot along. Dr. Nkrumah carried out the inspection, his first official duty of a visit which was to last 12 days. After his stay in Lagos, tours were to be made of the 3 regions and the Cameroons. It was a fine opportunity for the Prime Minister to see how life is lived in a country soon to follow in the independent steps of his own. After the military ceremonies were complete, Dr. Nkrumah walked across to meet ministers and people important in the life of the federal capital. In the Prime Minister's party were Mr. Krobo Edusi, now Minister of Communications and Transport, Mr. Kojo Botsio, Minister of External Affairs, and Mr. Kofi Bako, Minister of Information and Broadcasting. From the airport, Dr. Nkrumah left for the federal ministerial residence, where he stayed during his time in Lagos. Later, there was a reception to welcome the distinguished guest to Nigeria. Alhaji Abubakar Tafawa Balewa posed with his visitor. For this was a historic occasion, the first time that a Prime Minister of an independent Ghana had visited the Federation. Then both Prime Ministers awaited the arrival of His Excellency the Governor-General and Lady Robertson. Again, there were more pictures to pose for. There can be no doubt that many topics relating to West Africa's future would be discussed during the next 12 days, and many personal friendships made, which would help towards the establishing of a close understanding between Nigeria and Ghana. The police band provided the music, and the party was attended by some 500 guests. During his stay in Lagos, Dr. Nkrumah went to the new naval headquarters at Apapa, known as Her Majesty's Nigerian ship Kwara. He came by launch from Government House. The naval force is the youngest of Nigeria's fighting services. It became part of the armed forces in May 1958, but over a year earlier, training of the first entry of junior ratings had begun. The basic course lasts for 6 months and includes every aspect of life afloat. The name of the station is, of course, a historic one, for in 1832, the Kwara was one of the first ships ever to go up the River Niger. There can be no doubt that Dr. Nkrumah found this visit extremely interesting. The more so because for the first time, and to quote Sir James Robertson, Nigeria has her own navy, in which Nigerians may serve on the high seas for the protection of their country. After taking farewell of Mr. A.G. Gardner-Brown, the acting Deputy Governor-General, Dr. Nkrumah left for his next visit to the Yaba Trade Center. center, he was welcomed by the Federal Minister of Education, the Honorable Aja Nwachukwu, the principal of the center, Mr. W.G. Konke, and the permanent secretary to the Ministry of Education, Mr. V.H.K. Littlewood. The Yaba Center is an important part of the system of training young men for trade and industry. With the great expansion programs which are underway, Nigeria needs skilled craftsmen well versed in modern techniques, and at Yaba, the work of providing them is being carried out. Dr. Nkrumah saw many aspects of the center, including the fitting, turning, and cabinet making shops. The motor engineering department also came in for close inspection, and wherever he went, the 49-year-old Prime Minister of Ghana received a warm welcome from the students. Then to the mainland hotel for a civic luncheon given by the Lagos Town Council. Oba Adele II spoke first.
A great pleasure to propose a toast of our distinguished guest of honor this afternoon in the person of Dr. the Honorable Kwame Nkrumah, MP, on behalf of my chiefs, councillors, and all my people. Unless we really learn to respect these states one another, we can never achieve true harmony. We are happy to say that here in Nigeria, members of the Ghana armies are free and happy to pursue life in their own way. We are proud to say that the majority of them are worthy citizens of this country and true ambassadors of their country. Ladies and gentlemen, I have to request all of you to stand up with me and drink the health of Dr. the Honorable Nkrumah and his ministers.
Next, there was the presentation of a Yoruba gown and cap, a splendid souvenir for Dr. Nkrumah, a reminder of his happy and useful visit to the Federation. He then replied,
Your Highness, Deputy Governor, Councillors, ladies and gentlemen, perhaps what you have just done to me is but a demonstration of the goodwill that exists between Ghana and Nigeria. Perhaps I could only show myself to you as I am now, and that will be the end of my speech. But if I do so, I don't think I'll be doing justice to myself, or Your Highness, and the councillors. And so I want to take the occasion to say that I am most happy indeed to be your guest in this Asian city. And I want to thank you for the very warm welcome which has been extended to me and my party by you and fellow citizens of Lagos. As you said, Your Highness, Lagos has had a long association with Ghana. In 1874, for purpose of their own administration, the colonial or rather the British colonial government, joined your town administratively with what was then the Gold Coast colony. Many things have changed since that time. We in Ghana have been sovereign and independent for almost 2 years now, and Nigeria stands on the threshold of independence. I believe that the basis of true friendship and good neighborliness is genuine frankness, and it is for this reason that I wish to correct the wrong impressions in Nigeria and elsewhere regarding the measures we have had to take to preserve law and order in Ghana. In taking steps to rid Ghana of violence, terrorism, and subversion, the government has had the unpleasant but necessary duty to deport, among others, certain persons from Nigeria.
It was quite all right.
Your Highness, I do not want to use this occasion as a platform to give detailed explanations of my government actions in respect to these deportations. But I should like to stress that every case was thoroughly examined before action was taken to deport the person. Your Highness, we look back upon deportations and preventive detention as purely temporary measures designed to guarantee the stability of the state and preserve our hard-won independence. In Ghana, we are determined that the sovereign will of the people and the ballot box should constitute the only channel by which a political party can come to form a government. I believe that both Nigeria and Ghana have a great future as strongholds of democracy. And mark you, sir, democracy is not a new thing to our African way of life. It is inherent in our traditions and culture.
Then, with the thoughts and scenes of his own country very much in mind, Dr. Nkrumah said,
I have been criticized because some of our Nigerian brothers have been deported since independence. I wish to make it quite clear that those who have been deported because their conduct was found to be inimical to the security of the state. We could not detain them under the Preventive Detention Act. We could only, with painful reluctance, deport them. But when we deport them, where do they go? I understand some of them have been with us for years, and that even their connection here is so remote that when they come, they don't even they can discover a home. Your Highness, it will be of interest to know that there are in Ghana today some 200,000 Nigerians who are engaged in honest business and are making a positive contribution to the economic and social life of the country. Such people are welcome and will always be welcome in Ghana. There is in Africa today a political ferment and a yearning for freedom and unity of African peoples everywhere. The achievement of freedom and unity is the main preoccupation of all leaders and nationalities in Africa today. Towards that end, a free, independent, and sovereign Nigeria, in association with other independent African states, can make a positive contribution. Your Highness, we look forward to the day when the leaders of the various West African territories will be able to come together for the purpose of exploring ways and means of bringing the conception of West African unity to a reality. That day, I'm sure, is not far distant. And now, Chairman and Councillors, I wish again, on behalf of the government and people of Ghana, to thank you for the warm and spontaneous welcome accorded me and my party since our arrival here in Lagos. We look forward to our tour around the country, and we hope to return with happy memories of Nigeria and her people. Again, I thank you.
When he returned to Lagos from his visit to the regions and the southern Cameroons, Dr. Nkrumah held a press conference at Ikeja Airport.
Initiate or establish in Ghana? Maybe institutions or...
Oh, so many. I give an instance. For example, your administrative school at Zaria has very much impressed me. But I've always believed in, local government as the basis of all, democratic setup. And that's really impressed me, and I think it's a thing which Ghana should copy. You have a government, local government school, you see, but it doesn't go that far. It's only for local government administrators, but you have really a broad base for it, and that really impressed me very much. That's one instance I can give.
Mr. Prime Minister, I'll take you back in South Africa. It was reported sometime ago, about 2 weeks ago, that the Minister of External Affairs in South Africa, South African government, said that the intention, let me call it the intention of the government of Ghana to send a representative to the South African government, even though he was not proposing it, but that he felt that the South African government could not consider it view of the fact that before a government could exchange diplomatic representatives with another government, the government of that country should have been consulted. But in that light, did the Ghana government ever plan to send, to exchange diplomatic...
Well, naturally, it's the intention of the government to have, diplomatic relations, especially by way of High Commission and ambassadorial type to any of these countries. And the matter was really our intention. But as you know, according to all diplomatic relations, there must be consultation on this matter. If the South African government said no, there's nothing we can do. So it's quite right there in making that statement, that it needs consultation.
Mr. Prime Minister, a few minutes ago you gave us an instance of a Guinea national who was sentenced in court and ordered to be deported, but that your committee or your decided that it should not be deported. But don't you think that is overriding the decision of the court?
Oh no, the court, you can. That's according to law. You see, the court orders, but once the court has ordered, I think that's the end of it. The executive can do anything. But do the wrong thing here, the government should naturally have a discussion with the leaders of the Western region, and I had a talk with the Premier. And I think the area is quite cleared now for a real lasting and better friendship. That's what I can say.
This visit by the Prime Minister of a neighboring state had been a great success. Dr. Nkrumah left with a clear appreciation of the Nigerian way of life. The friendships he had made and the discussions which took place will obviously be of great value to both countries. The Federal Prime Minister walked with him to the Ghana Airways plane, which was to fly him home to Accra. Before he boarded the aircraft, there were more farewells to be taken for many new friends there were to wish him bon voyage. The visit had been successful from all points of view. The 12-day tour was over, but the benefits which will spring from it in the years to come cannot yet be estimated.
I remember in 1965, during the Kenya's Independence Day, we were asked to go to Kenya and exhibit the Ghana brand of football in those days. On Sunday, when we met them, we beat them 13 goals to nil, a Kenya national team. And Jomo Kenyatta was there. A very nice independence present for Jomo Kenyatta.
At this time, the progress of the Black Stars reflected Ghana's economic and political dominance of the continent. When Ghana hosted the African Cup of Nations in 1963, the Black Stars were a shining example to the rest of Africa. Gyamfi, the only black African coach in the competition, Agri Finn, the first of 4 Black Star captains to lift the Nations Cup. Brimming with confidence, the Black Stars travelled to Tunisia to defend their African title 2 years later, meeting the hosts in the final. Nkrumah had personally promised new houses to the Black Stars if they secured a second African championship, which they did.
In 1965, I was the footballer of the year. I was given a television, and a special song by the police was played for me. All the ministers of state were standing up, and I was the only person who was sitting there. But I wept tears of joy.
In 1966, whilst on a trip to China, Nkrumah was overthrown by a military coup. Ghanaian football would never be the same again.
Recently, we were asked to come for an award. We were given a tea kettle. A tea kettle.
On the night before the coup, truckloads of troops had moved into Accra. Within 24 hours, the army and the police had the whole country in their power. At Flagstaff House, Nkrumah's guards offered brief resistance. 30 were reported killed, plus 11 Russian technicians and security men who lived inside Flagstaff House. Other Russians were bundled out of the country, while Ghanaians set about removing the concrete symbols of Nkrumah's Marxist regime. Popular support for the takeover appeared to be universal and spontaneous. Everywhere, charges were voiced that Nkrumah turned Ghana into a police state, reduced it to bankruptcy, and then, to get out of debt, put it in pawn to the communists. But while discarding communist philosophies, Ghana's new rulers are keeping the door open. They've taken no decision yet to break off relations with China or with Russia. But what of the man?
Actually, we gave them the option of choosing between cash compensation and compensation in kind. Compensation in kind being moving into the settlement towns which we had planned to build for them. 10% of the people chose cash compensation, 90% chose compensation in kind. But mind you, we had to persuade them to choose compensation in kind rather than compensation in cash.
Because of this unsentimental approach, the operation is claimed to have been much cheaper than at Kariba. But Ghanaian householders have other reasons for not wanting to move. They are fetishes, objects of local worship.
Before the evacuation, we conducted a social survey, and we were particular about these fetishes, because we know people have buried these things in their houses, others have them in trees, others worship the rivers near the villages, and they regard these things as protectors of their souls and the community. Therefore, when they are moving, they find it difficult to move without consulting these fetishes or perpetuating and pouring libation to these fetishes before moving. And because there's this fear of the unknown, they tend to resist any evacuation. There are some villages who refuse to move because it's a taboo to cross a certain river with their fetishes. And we were able to overcome this by offering them the president's own helicopter to lift this fetish. That is, the fetish would not have to cross this particular river, but to be lifted in the air and landed right on the spot, and this did the trick.
All this has been going on since 1963. Work on the dam began 2 years before that, after 5 years of financial negotiation which left Ghana finding half the money and international funds the rest. It's what's known as a rock-fill dam, nearly half a mile long, and there's a fair volume of rock in it. There are two sets of sluice gates upstream on the left bank, the other end from the powerhouse. They'll let flood water through and down two huge spillways into the valley below. The Volta is a restless river. From low to high water, it can multiply itself 1,000 times. The dam was designed by American engineers, Kaisers, and built with Ghanaian labor by Italian contractors in Prigillo. For the moment, the dam site is a corner of Ghana where the observances of the West still rule, especially of Italy. Ghanaians are already training to run the dam.
C'est en Afrique que va nous amener l'actualité politique. En Afrique où, comme vous le savez, le 8e coup d'État de ces derniers mois a provoqué la chute du premier président du premier État indépendant d'Afrique noire, Kwame Nkrumah, dont longtemps une partie du tiers-monde avait même fait le héros de ce qu'on appelait la révolution africaine. 15 ans, presque jour pour jour, auront ainsi séparé le moment de la chute de Nkrumah de celui où, en février 1951, les Anglais le tiraient de prison pour le préparer à l'installer au pouvoir. Dès que les événements du Ghana ont été connus en Europe, Roger Louis s'est rendu immédiatement sur place et ce sont ses impressions un peu hâtives comme toujours, car comme toujours, il est rentré au dernier moment, la nuit dernière exactement. Ce sont ses impressions dont il va maintenant vous faire part. évidemment, ce sont des impressions hâtives, c'est même un commentaire improvisé au fur et à mesure que ces images que vous voyez se dérouler maintenant passent devant mes yeux. Ce que je vous propose ce soir, c'est donc plus une explication d'image, un peu à l'état brut qu'autre chose. Lorsque l'on arrive à Accra, capitale du Ghana, on rencontre, la première chose que l'on rencontre, ce sont ces fameuses manifestations de rue que vous avez dû déjà voir au journal télévisé, j'imagine, que l'on appelle ici des manifestations spontanées.
We were asked to study ideology, which means the ideas of the president.
Il s'agit ici d'étudiants en journalisme, exactement, qui m'expliquent hâtivement qu'ils avaient été forcés jusqu'à maintenant de pratiquer une idéologie dont ils ne partageaient pas la conviction, et que, à présent, grâce au nouveau régime, ils vont pouvoir s'exprimer de façon libre. Ces manifestations, soi-disant spontanées, sont en fait, je m'en suis rendu compte, préparées dans la mesure où le commissariat de police donne les autorisations préalables. Et tout cela paraît un peu dérisoire, je dois dire. Ces groupes finissent en général leur démonstration par des discussions intestines. Ce qui frappe en arrivant à Accra, c'est l'extrême prudence et l'atmosphère de peur, malgré tout, qui continue à régner sur la ville. On a peur que Nkrumah revienne. Ces manifestations nous amènent devant le siège du parti unique, la maison de Kwame dont l'enseigne a été, et spécialement ici, devant le siège du Convention People Party, qui était le parti unique de Kwame Nkrumah au Ghana. Il fait très chaud parce qu'il y a non seulement la chaleur du soleil, mais aussi celle qui rayonne et que je sens très bien en ce moment de ce gigantesque tas de cendres qui, après 3 jours, continue à se consumer. Comme vous allez pouvoir vous en rendre compte. Et qui renferme toute la, sinon tout au moins une partie de la documentation qui se trouvait au siège du parti unique. Lorsqu'on fouille un peu dans ce tas de cendres, on peut se rendre compte à peu près de ce qu'était cette documentation ou de ces brochures. Voici une sélection des travaux de Mao Tse-tung, le journal médical chinois, le marxisme-léninisme expliqué, en très peu de pages d'ailleurs, un livre sur l'activité américaine au Congo-Léopoldville. Bref, on se rend compte que l'orientation de ce Convention People Party était, disons, extrêmement facile à concevoir. Bon, en fait, cette constatation que j'avais faite auprès de ce tas de cendres ne m'apprenait pas grand-chose que je ne connaissais déjà, à savoir que le cœur de M. Nkrumah était orienté vers l'Est. Mais ce qui m'a surpris lorsque je suis entré à l'intérieur de ce siège, c'est cet ensemble de fresques que vous allez voir maintenant, et qui représente, je ne sais pas comment exprimer cela, d'abord la déification de Nkrumah, bien sûr, mais aussi une espèce de magnification de la race noire. Sur chacune de ces fresques, on découvre ainsi que ce sont les Africains qui ont inventé l'écriture et qui l'expliquent aux Blancs, que ce sont les Africains qui ont inventé la chimie, que ce sont les femmes africaines qui ont inventé l'architecture en construisant les premières cases, que ce sont les Africains qui ont inventé les mathématiques et qui l'expliquent aux Blancs, que ce sont les Africains qui ont expliqué aussi aux Romains une nouvelle forme d'écriture qu'ils ignoraient, et que Ésope était un noir, et on le voit ici racontant ses fables. Cette espèce de glorification donc de la race Noirs, disons des Africains, se trouve continué logiquement par un certain nombre de slogans qui sont visibles encore le long des avenues et que le nouveau gouvernement est en train de démolir. Ce nouveau gouvernement, le voici d'ailleurs. Voici le général Nkrumah, qui se présente lui-même d'ailleurs, au cours d'une conférence de presse assez curieuse, comme vous allez le voir.
On my right is Major General E.K. Kotoka.
Vous pouvez déjà vous rendre compte que le major général Kotoka est probablement le plus célèbre de ce Concile de libération nationale. Mais voici le plus surprenant. C'était la première conférence de presse. Et cet homme que vous voyez là, vous l'avez, je crois, déjà vu au journal télévisé. C'est cet homme qui, à Londres, a déclaré qu'il était en fait le maître d'œuvre de la Révolution, que c'était lui qui, de Londres, avait dirigé ce coup d'État et qu'il avait été formé pour cela par l'agence américaine de formation de contre-espionnage. Il est arrivé à Accra par le même avion d'ailleurs qui m'a amené moi-même. Il s'attendait à une réception triomphale. Il a été arrêté immédiatement. Et vous assistez maintenant à une explication pénible de sa part. Il doit déclarer qu'en fait, il ne connaissait aucun des membres du comité révolutionnaire. Il est tenu en joue par des soldats. Et il doit faire amende honorable en public. Et le général Nkrumah a tenu absolument à démontrer ainsi que le coup d'État n'était pas organisé de l'extérieur. Et il va se manifester d'ailleurs avec violence maintenant.
How did you become the brain behind this coup? Did you come to brainwash me, Kotoka, the police, or somebody, and tell us how to conduct this?
Il est en train de lui demander si cet homme le connaissait lui, Nkrumah, ou connaissait le colonel Kotoka, ou connaissait aucun des membres. Et celui-ci est bien obligé de reconnaître qu'il ne connaissait personne. C'est une première manifestation de combat entre les militaires et les civils, si on peut dire. Dans les rues d'Accra, des scènes que vous connaissez, celles que l'on rencontre partout où il y a des coups d'État, où il y a des révolutions. Ce sont des scènes de fouilles, mais elles se passent ici de façon bon enfant. On a l'impression malgré tout que le peuple ne croit pas qu'il va lui arriver quelque chose. Partout dans la ville, il y a des autodafés. En voici un, c'est devant le siège des syndicats où j'ai rencontré un Ghanéen qui parlait français.
Les papiers.
Les papiers de quoi?
De Nkrumah.
De Nkrumah?
Oui.
Il n'y a pas que des papiers, il y a des films aussi là.
Il y a des papiers.
Oui.
Que les Ghanéens ne sont pas d'accord avec le pouvoir des papiers. C'est pour cela que nous avons besoin de papiers.
Et qu'est-ce que c'est comme papier?
Les papiers?
Oui.
Ce sont les communismes, les papiers des communistes de Nkrumah. Et ce sont les travailleurs qui brûlent les papiers. Parce qu'ils ne sont pas d'accord avec le Nkrumah. Comment que Nkrumah nous trouvons?
Oui.
Que nous n'avons pas de travail. Nous avons il avait fait quelque chose pour nous faire souffrir parce que nous n'avons pas d'argent. C'est pour cela que nous ne voulons pas voir ces papiers et tous ces papiers, les photos et les portraits.
Et tout le monde est contre le communisme ici?
Oui, nous ne sommes pas d'accord d'avoir ce communisme en Ghana. À Ghana ici.
Vous croyez que c'est de la faute aux communistes si vous n'aviez pas de travail?
Oui, c'est la faute. Parce qu'il n'y a pas de travail.
Est-ce que vous croyez que ça va aller mieux maintenant?
Oui, ça sera bien maintenant.
Pourquoi?
Parce que nous-mêmes, les soldats et les polices avaient le pouvoir de nous donner le travail de faire maintenant.
Et où est-ce qu'ils vont trouver l'argent
Nous trouvons l'argent parce que maintenant, tous les Européens qui viendront ici pour nous donner le travail.
Voilà, en fait, je crois que le gros problème était que la raréfaction à la fois des vivres, et on accuse effectivement l'orientation communiste de Nkrumah d'avoir provoqué, disons, cette raréfaction des vivres. Je suis allé au marché pour me rendre compte si effectivement les importations de nourriture de l'Est étaient effectives. J'ai rencontré du sucre venant du RSS, du sucre venant de Chine, des tomates venant de Bulgarie, des peignes venant de Tchécoslovaquie. Mais c'est tout ce que j'ai vu au point de vue marchandises importées de l'Est, car au fond, dans ce marché, on trouve aussi les produits venant de tous les côtés, de l'Est comme de l'Ouest.
The way I see things in Ghana, I would doubt, indeed doubt, that Ghana will ever see the kind of political system we've had. I'm saying that not because this is the kind of program the PNUC has for the country, but I think out of all these things that are happening in Ghana, something is going to evolve. Some political structure is going to evolve. And this structure, what I'm saying that it isn't going to be the kind of structure we have known in the past. We've had party politics brought down to us from Europe. We've worked with it for 25 years. It's been disastrous. The people are disillusioned. They are disenchanted. They've lost faith in the system. And I don't believe that they will go back to that system again.
What's your response to these accusations that there have been very bad violations of human rights since the PNDC came to power?
I have a lot of respect for human rights. And I will not be a party to any government that will abuse human rights. The PNDC respects human rights. We believe in the rule of law. And this is what we've tried to do. People may have been killed here and there, like it will happen in Britain, America, or elsewhere. If these did happen, then it happened without the approval of the PNDC. We as a government have never authorized any killing of that sort.
Labors, toils of the brave, which have brought results. Kwame, the star of Ghana, Nkrumah, star of Ghana, everybody toils of the brave, and the sweat of their labors, toils of the brave, which have brought results. Ghana, we now have freedom. Ghana, land of freedom, everybody toils of the brave, and the sweat of their labors, toils of the brave, which have brought results. Gold Coast will thank Nananom and elders, late Kesli Hayford, Mensan Saba, Pa Grant, Sergeant Ajete, and all who fought for freedom. Everybody! Toils of the brave, and the sweat of their labors, toils of the brave, which have brought results.
You could never be not say your friend when you're the bonnet. Ghana memo ye buye ne ye pe contraining, centrane, treasure Ghana man and pesa money. Kofi babone, me boko ko jani bonnet. The man something but nature Ghana man say munti, mini, or bra for me wafa hundi. Kuma modi momu jumedi munkulmidi, no say. Jengara assassini e ya body de mayen. Mujana nanan mi fegunya de to homayen. Domien, boyen, jeyen, edu. Mene won so say yes we be ye biatwa so momu aso kata so omanyi mudi e maso ene. If you said why your mama gonna will be a lawyer for, doctor for my miss and for, ready for, driver for my miss a fita for, aircraft for, tailor for my miss a baba for, soldier for, teacher for my miss a suku for, rap for, Ghana rap soft for, me say me straight on man for, when you know when you're back, she say yet the fact, but you will say we back one ebu, Ukambo mo embu, Kobe Asante Kotopo, map beba is the motto, Yanfa Kotuloto, Mayimu Mofrani, yes, Munyanto Boasenia Humbrasi, Ubuni Nidi Namon Koto, Bible just said the way Jane Wunani. Unkwana swawari wasase so inti munye brebre Ghana yemine odia Kedian Pon Kwame Ensa, Osoni Asase ya Ensa, Nanano Musama for Ensa, Yi Kwame Nkrumah Paye, Kedian Pon Kwame Ensa, Osoni Asase ya Ensa, Nanano Musama for Ensa, Yi Kwame Nkrumah Paye, Uwe Nanchen, Ofo Kwame, Nahama Ghana, the Fred Osajifo, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah. Yebo wudin, wudye wuyentin, wudu wunyasa na jegana to hobe yo hin, ewim yedin, brofo kuma bobri me fisi bobri se wakukudu podo so te senwin. Dr. Kwame Nkrumah wudu wunyasa te senshoma, Afrika mamu nyina ye jutu mu se wuni mo homa, bapoma, weni ate saberima, weni afiti sabronoma, padum no ada roma wa magana nyafa hudie, yasha man se nyina mo munya aso na munti, krikete ibini mabu home so, krikete adeshema mabu home so, krikete asantini mabu home so, krikete Antini mabo homeso, cricket ayikweni mabo homeso, cricket bawuni mabo homeso. Hausa, Kwapem, Achim, Bono, Dakumba, Nkrai. Ghana Fujina, Afemi Begunsa, Osajifo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah Brabe Jensa, Nana Numpeni Famu Democrato Hoji Ghana, Meyi Mayen So Yetonsa, Afremoni Ghana, Bushme Beransa, Ma Force Mume Jensa, Munina Echechi Japa Yesese Mumo Donsa, Ipa Boni Kani Nkrumah Ghana, Nibegu Asie Dia Mumoni Moni Triso, Oma Ghana Kwaso, Oma Penny Kwaso, Obra for me Kwaso, Mamre Kwaso, Yanko. Mr. Kedian Pon Kwame Ensa, Osoni Asase ya Ensa, Nanano Musama for Ensa, Yi Kwame Nkrumah Paye, Kedian Pon Kwame Ensa, Osoni Asase ya Ensa, Nanano Musama for Ensa, Yi Kwame Nkrumah Paye, Kedian Pon Kwame Ensa, Osoni Asase ya Ensa, Nanano Musama for Ensa, Yi Kwame Nkrumah Paye, Kedian Pon Kwame Ensa, Osoni Asase ya Ensa, Nanano Musama for Ensa, Yi Kwame Nkrumah Paye.